And we're live. So, who are you and what do you do?
My name is David Darrock. I've spent the last 25 years working in the medical device and diagnostic industry in various roles spanning R&D, operations, quality, regulatory, and all sorts. In that time, I've worked for small companies, for startups, medium-sized companies, and large multinational corporations. I've developed and been involved in the development and manufacture of many, many different tests from HIV, hepatitis, diabetes, TB, and even some veterinary products, things like swine fever and avian flu.
And how did we first connect?
Well, we met during the UK government ventilator challenge back in 2020, at the peak of the COVID pandemic, before any of the restrictions had been lifted or any of the vaccines had been developed and released to the public. It was a strange time.
It was a strange time. And it was actually, we were wearing masks before it was mandated on the project.
Yeah.
And I think we still joke about it today that it definitely made people aware of, first of all, how much we might lip read.
Yeah.
And then also how our brain makes up what someone might look like. And it was only when the mask mandate got lifted that we got to see each other's faces fully. We're like, oh, that person has a moustache. I never would have guessed.
Yeah. Because I think we would have seen each other frequently, 5 days a week, something like that. And it was weeks before we knew what we actually each of us looked like. Yeah.
Like a reverse Guess Who. So how have you changed your corner of the world?
Well, in the industry in which I work, I've been fortunate to work on many products that have made a difference to, I'd like to say, a lot of people. A large proportion of my career has been spent in women's health, working for example, one of the companies, it's a company that owns the brand K Blue. So some of your listeners might have used their tests to find out that they were pregnant, or used the tests for ovulation testing to get pregnant in the first place. I've also been fortunate to work on a test for unexplained infertility. You know, I'm proud to be able to say that there are people in this world, families, who wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that test and tests like that. So it's a great industry to work for, and to know that actually you can make a difference.
So what's next?
Continue to do what I'm doing. I'm currently working on a couple of very worthwhile projects that unfortunately I can't go into any detail at the moment, but they have the potential to fundamentally change how people access care, particularly groups who need it the most. I'm tremendously excited about it. There's a fantastic team that's been gathered as part of this, so we'll see where it goes. Ask me again in 2 years' time.
I'll remember to do that. And what's the biggest hurdle between you and what's next?
Well, the biggest hurdle will be how quickly people are willing to embrace change. Not the people that need it, the people that it serves, but the people who pay for it and the health providers themselves. It's not usually about whether something works or whether something is better than the status quo. Healthcare professionals are conservative in nature, and rightly so. Their patients are precious to them. They don't want to try something that's unproven or relatively unproven. So there are definite hurdles that we have to get over. Even having regulatory approval, market clearance often isn't enough. You need to go far beyond that. In healthcare, the product has to fit into how the clinicians work, how the systems operate, and how patients live their lives. The product has to align with all these. And of course, you can increase your chances of adoption if you work with those stakeholders early. Each of those individual groups through outreach, human factors, and usability testing and engineering.
And what do you see as the biggest change for your industry this year?
As with almost every industry, it's hard to ignore the impact of AI. There's huge potential. It can be used to aid diagnosis and aid in the implementation of the care plan. And I think it will also make it cheaper and quicker to bring new products to market, as AI can do many of the menial tasks, obviously under supervision of humans. But on the flip side, funding is the lifeblood of innovation, and currently much of the funding available to startups is being diverted into the industry of AI. So there has to be a balance between physical hardware products and SaaS products that don't involve AI and the AI models themselves. So I think there needs to be a balance, needs to be struck. AI should be a tool to be used alongside many of the existing tests and pathways, not necessarily to replace them.
And what is something that has changed your mind in the last month?
Well, unfortunately, recently I've seen both the good and the bad sides of the NHS. As an organisation, it was created in 1948 in post-war Britain. The country, medicine, technology, society has moved on since then. And whilst it was and it still is a great founding idea, it's an organisation that's maybe been slow to adapt to changes. Organisations, particularly large organisations, need to be flexible and elastic so that they can change and adapt with the times. So I think it's a difficult question to answer. What can be done? More funding? Maybe, but the strongest outcomes don't always come from the highest spend. There's a lot of duplication and waste that, honestly, I don't think that's the answer. There's probably enough money spent on it. For example, in England, each NHS trust will have their own departments dedicated to certain things that's duplicated throughout each trust, and that's unnecessary, really, particularly when it's mandated from above, from NHS X or digital was NHS England. Make it private? No, I don't think so, even though there's definitely scope for closer integration with the private sector. I think keeping it free at point of contact is a great model. It's something that, as a country, we should be proud of and continue to be proud of. I don't think that's an answer either, but I think the one thing I would look to do would be to make it apolitical, so that funding is ring-fenced and the NHS doesn't have to adapt on each 5-year political election cycle, so that actually you can put in structure for change and actually get it working in the way that it was intended in the first place.
Yeah, I think with some of the bigger infrastructure and essential needs for people countrywide, like you were saying, a term is not long enough to make the changes. We've spoken about this before. It will take about 3 years to break down all the structures before you can fix them up again. But something that is a 20-year plan, that doesn't matter who comes into power, and it's a commitment that would allow people to actually see the benefits of those changes. It could happen with water, it could happen with rail, but like you were saying, with the medical industry, change takes a lot of time because you don't want to implement something that then will not help patients at the end of the day.
That's right. And I think sometimes politicians need to accept that mistakes are made. Maybe companies privatized or industries are privatized that maybe shouldn't have been. And even though there's shareholders involved, maybe there are better ways of doing things.
Stakeholders instead of shareholders.
Yeah.
A slightly greater scale of what we've been speaking. So you've spoken about what you'd like to see change in the UK, but what is the change you most want to see in the world?
The change I'd like to see most in the world is earlier and more equitable access to healthcare. My best friend growing up was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 6, 7, 8 years of age. And the diagnosis was when he was seriously ill in hospital with what's called PKA. And it's a condition that, unfortunately, it can be fatal.
So many children who went into comas and then passed away until insulin was produced outside the body
Yeah.
and could be provided to them.
The last 40 years, nothing much has changed. So there's still many children being diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in hospital rather than at home. So it's things like that. But although there are programs that are being rolled out, clinical trials for screening programs, these things can't happen quick enough. So it's that sort of thing that, a little bit like the COVID vaccine, where if there's enough will with enough stakeholders, then it can happen.
And the need is seen as great enough.
The drives for this has been the approval of drugs that can help offset the effects of diabetes. So it's been very much a commercial driver rather than a clinical driver for these programs.
Now, on a more upbeat note, what is something that never fails to change your mood?
Spending time with family, without question. That's always a big reset. Holidays, together, just making memories. I think that's the thing that I treasure the most. And also friendship as well, with work and with what I do. And as with so many people working away a lot or moving around the country or the world for work, quite often you tend to drift away from friendship. So being able to loop back, speaking to people who maybe you haven't spoken to for months or even years, and they're clicking again, it's always a good thing. It's always a nice thing to be able to do. And yeah, I should really do more of that.
And finally, your change of pace question. What have you learned about change since starting your career?
It's hard. It's much, much harder than people realize. It's easy to come up with a good idea or even build something that works, but getting people to actually use it consistently is a completely different challenge. You see that in healthcare with both better tests or better pathways, but if it doesn't fit how people actually live or how clinicians work, then it won't get adopted. Same in organizations with changes in process or modernization of things like manufacturing techniques and things. You'll always find early resistance to change. So incremental steps is quite often the best way to go about things, baby steps, because you'll often come across the phrase, well, we've always done it this way, which is
all the phrases in the world.
Oh,
That's my antithesis.
Yes, it's my perfect. It really is. My blood boils when I hear that. Although, keep it in. And when something's hard, then it's easy to throw the towel in and not follow through with that. But there's a reason why change needs to happen. It's because something isn't working as well as it could. So it needs strong people. It needs people who genuinely care about change and what they're doing, rather than change for change's sake, which, on the flip side, isn't necessarily a good thing. So, yeah, in the end, changes aren't the best changes aren't the big bangs, the big announcements. They're the quite often smaller things that take time and almost sneak in under the radar, that suddenly people don't realize that they've made a change after 6 months of doing something and it's embedded in the culture.
Yeah, I think obviously I take a lot of people on change journeys, and you saying that, I've just got this visual of a river, right? The river changes, but it takes so long. You don't realize day by day how it might erode the bank and start curving. But if you had the ability to look at it over 1,000 years or 5,000 years, you'd see that where it started and where it ended were very different places. But throughout, everything continues to flow, and not always smoothly. The river might burst its banks sometimes, or it might be a drought, but it's never staying the same.
No, No, that's right. And, you know, you get your little oxbow legs on the way.
Well, thank you for speaking with me today. It's been lovely.
Yeah. Been a pleasure. Thank you.